Hello and welcome into Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler alongside Tony Hollinsworth, Sam Sprunger, and what the folks that are listening don't know, it's been a bit of a rocky start. We have some technical issues. As you'll notice, Sam Sprunger's audio quality is a little different because he's on the phone. But hey, the good news is we finally have liftoff on this episode because there were questions just a little bit ago.
It literally was one of those that it was like, well, maybe just this week is not the week. And it's like, well, no, we're doing this. It's been too long. We're doing this.
I know. It's been so long since all three of us, and it's like, not today. Not today.
I guess my computer just decided, you know what? I don't know. I don't understand this. We're going to have to figure this one out. And that's why we're sitting where we're at.
Even your computer said, wait a minute, you're still doing this?
Well, on a more beat note, 4th of July holiday weekend has come and gone, and we're kind of moving forward, but everybody have a good 4th?
Yeah, I came back from Canada just in time for the 4th, so it's I went out of the country just to get, I guess, a new appreciation, maymaybe? I don't know. Yeah. Maybe.
I still have all 7 fingers and all 6 toes.
7 fingers, 6 toes, that boy. Kept them all. You learned from previous sports.
Exactly.
All right, for this edition of Big Talk, we're going to be getting into a couple of different things. One being we're going to be talking a little bit about sports media and how the Pac-12 TV agreement or lack thereof may end up maybe being a catalyst or a bit of a pioneer for future TV contracts for other conferences. We'll get into some of what we're talking about there a little bit later on. But also, fellas, we have not broken down the NBA draft and the Big Ten influence in that yet after that draft picks in the NBA. Am I buffered? You guys hear me still?
There we go. Now you're back.
Okay. Big Ten has 8 draft picks in the NBA draft this year. We want to talk a little bit about those. 5 in the first round, 3 in the second round. I'll get to recapping, but before we run through the list, is there any observations that stood out to either of you that really kind of popped off the page to you before we run through?
For me, it was Trace Jackson Davis going so late. It was kind of a surprise to me that he was so late in the draft. It makes you wonder why the teams waited until when they did, and then he gets picked and then traded. So he gets to go to a team that could do some pretty good things, but you're not sure what it was that people didn't see or didn't want to take the chance on.
Yeah, between him and to me too, Chris Murray going to Portland, getting to pair up with Scoot Henderson, because that to me is probably one of the most interesting. The fact that Portland has been one of these, they've rode Damian Lillard so hard for so many years, and now they're getting this potentially a very young, dynamic duo to have for a very, very long time. So it'll be exciting to see Chris Murray basically be able to be a star on this team, basically with one other guy. So that one I thought was pretty interesting too, that Chris Murray, and I believe he went late as well, but he was one of Portland's first 2 picks.
Yeah, he was a late first round draft pick. Matter of fact, why don't we take a moment and we'll recap the Big Ten in the NBA draft. With the 11th pick, the Magic took Jet Howard out of Michigan. With the 15th pick, the Hawks drafted Kobe Bufkin out of Michigan. So the Wolverines get 2 top 15 picks in this year's NBA draft, which is pretty incredible. The 17th pick, the Lakers drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino out of Indiana. This might be one of my favorite picks so far out of the Big Ten, because I just think, especially we saw on the trip to West Lafayette earlier this year, Jalen Hood-Schifino just is able to create. I mean, the performance he put together against Purdue at Mackey Arena is what we're talking about here, Sam. It showed to me a high level of skill that translates to the NBA, because he's able to create any kind of shot anytime down the floor. He's got a great mid-range game. I think that's going to be a big, big plus in the NBA.
And I guess that's why confuses me even more as to Trace Jackson Davis, because while he didn't succeed necessarily against Purdue, he did so much against everybody else, and for multiple years. It wasn't just like, 1 year. Shafino only played college basketball for 1 year. So like that, I guess that's what surprises me about Trace Jackson Davis. And I don't know if he's missized for his position or what, but that's Shafino. I assumed he'd be a top 10 pick. That's kind of what I was thinking that he would be, or in the lottery at very least, and I thought, Davis would probably be a late first round or mid first round, and it just didn't happen.
If we take a look at the other 2 first-round picks, Chris Murray, as Tony mentioned, was drafted by Portland at number 23. Chris Murray out of Iowa. Of course, his brother just had a phenomenal rookie season with Sacramento just earlier this year. And then at number 28, the final first-round pick for the Big Ten, Bryce Sensabaugh from Ohio State was drafted by the Utah Jazz. So there's your 5 first-round draft picks for the Big Ten. For the second round, Jalen Pickett out of Penn State was drafted 32nd by the Indiana Pacers. And
Good
moving
pick.
down, yeah, I like that as well. And we can get into that because I do also want to mention that the 46th pick was Seth Lundy from Penn State. And this marks the first time ever in Penn State men's basketball history that they've had 2 Nittany Lions selected in the same draft. So a huge, huge moment for the Penn State basketball program as Lundy goes to Atlanta at 46. And then finally, we've been talking a little bit about it that maybe this is a bit of the surprise. The Wizards drafted Trace Jackson Davis at number 57 out of Indiana, and then he was traded to Golden State from there. So I think there's a couple of different avenues we can go down here as we break this down. But I want to start with my thoughts on the Trace Jackson Davis bit as well, because I think a lot of times it matters where you land. And for Trace Jackson Davis to land at Golden State through the trade, I mean, as you said, Sam, you wonder if maybe he's just missized for that position. You think about NBA bigs now. NBA bigs are tall, they're long, and they can shoot from the outside. Trace Jackson Davis isn't the tallest. He doesn't have a proven outside jumper that we've seen on display in games throughout years. But if I had to point to one big in the NBA that maybe is a little bit smaller for the position, you could maybe say, at least height-wise, maybe doesn't have the greatest outside shot, that isn't playing it necessarily the same way everybody else is, it's Draymond Green. And now Trace Jackson Davis gets to learn from the cloth that Draymond Green has sort of created through the years, where Draymond, of course, is the defensive engine of that Warriors team. He's the leader of the team. He's the heartbeat of the team. And he puts things into motion offensively, even without scoring the ball. We've seen Trace Jackson Davis's passing ability in the Big Ten. We've been wowed by it for years. Besides just his ability to score near the rim, we've seen his length on display. He's a good rim protector. I believe Trace Jackson Davis can kind of learn at the hip of Draymond Green. And as Draymond gets older and older and older, Draymond's what? I should have looked this up first, but he's got to be about 33. 33? Okay. I mean, maybe Trace Jackson Davis could be that next guy kind of following there. And you remember Draymond was a second-round pick himself. Like, there's a lot of similarities I see here.
And I even thought for a quick second, and then they re-signed him, I thought maybe they traded for Davis to replace Green, because he went free agent, and I thought, excuse me, it would be financially, it would save him a ton of money. And I thought maybe, like you were saying, he's kind of fits that mold of what they've used Draymond for. I don't know that he's going to be the firework of all the technical fouls, and they're going to say, but I think you're right. Maybe they re-signed Draymond Green to make sure that he gets Davis in place for Curry's end of his career running, and maybe he's that extra one at the end.
And I think it should be important to note here too, before we get you to jump in, Tony, is Steve Kerr's been on the record saying that they can't replace Draymond. They can't do the championship runs without Draymond. And large part, besides just the defense and igniting some of the different offensive sets and so on and so forth, is the voice he has in the locker room, his leadership. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily something that, I mean, you can just pass down to somebody to lead the way Draymond does, because Draymond does it kind of the Izzo way. Like it's a unique way. It's a very hard, aggressive way. But I think from a skill standpoint, Trayce Jackson-Davis really could kind of follow that path, and maybe, and because look, I'm not saying that Trayce Jackson-Davis isn't a leader. I don't want this to get twisted or misinterpreted in any way. But doing it the Draymond way is a very different way. But maybe at least seeing the way Draymond leads people, Trayce Jackson-Davis will be able to learn from that, besides just the basketball skills. And maybe the Warriors find a pretty big piece here for the future.
Yeah. And don't get it twisted either. You know, as much as people don't like Draymond is one of those, I would consider him a great kind of support player. Like, he does all the intangibles that you need in a basketball team that, like Dalton mentioned, you know, you can't really teach. You just have to kind of see and potentially try to, you know, copy and follow.
He's the Horace Grant.
Right. And I think that's what Tom Izzo does better than anything. You know, everybody talks about how all, you know, Mike Krzyzewski did with Duke and creating all these superstars. Tom Izzo creates superstars in a different way, through the Tom Izzo way of, they are great, you know, they are great teammates in the fact of they will overall make the team better and not try to just do it individually. Now, much to Sam's point, I thought when they drafted Trayce Jackson-Davis, I was like, okay, they have a bigger guy than Draymond Green, because, you know, you guys were kind of talking about him being undersized. At least ESPN has him at 6'9", 245, and Draymond is 6'6", and he's 230. So I mean, he is bigger than Draymond in that aspect. But no, I definitely thought, okay, this is a guy that, like you said, he landed in probably one of the best spots that you could. He'll have Clay, he has Steph, now he has Chris Paul. Three great veteran guys for him to learn from and basically build the core team around. I thought it was a great place for him to land. And honestly, looking at where all these guys landed as far as the overall teams, he, to me, landed in the absolute best spot with probably the best team for who he got drafted and where he got drafted to, in my opinion.
And if you look at the Warriors now have the best of both worlds, if that was their thought about Davis, is now they've got Green until basically the end of his career. I mean, let's say it this way, the end of his career that matters. He's going to be like 37 by the time this contract's over. He might have a couple of years left, but they're not going to be at the high production that he's been able to do.
Not everybody's LeBron, where they're doing it at 38,
Correct. Yeah. And so, like, you know, and now they get 4 years of Green being able to kind of guide Davis, and, you know, Davis is going to be able to do it in his own way, but yet he's going to have that base of how it's been run for so long. And if he fits in well with Steph and with Clay, it's gonna be just fine for the Warriors.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big play by Golden State. They always seem to do pretty well around the draft time. And again, I mean, they're one of the just about the only superstar team that drafted its team instead of going the free agency route. And I mean, it looks like they might be making some nice future plays here down the road as well. A couple of those Penn State players, we mentioned Jalen Pickett and Seth Lundy being drafted. Sam's face lit up when we talked about Jalen Pickett going early in the second round. Yeah, I loved watching him play in the Big Ten all year long. But what really stood out to you there that kind of dropped your jaw?
Well, the fact that he went into the second round kind of surprised me. That was the first thing. But if I've got an NBA team, it's the Pacers. So, like, I got really excited because I know what we've watched Jalen Pickett all year, you know, and talked about how you know, what kind of player he could take over a game. I don't think it's not going to happen in the NBA. I think there's going to be games that all of a sudden he just blows up for 45 points and he's going to take the team. And that team is such, you know, is just ready. Halliburton's there, you know, he just got the super max or whatever. And, you know, they've got pieces that are ready to do things. And when Halliburton wasn't hurt, the Pacers were like the fifth best team in the East. and then he got hurt and they fell off to like 10th or 11th and didn't, or 12th or whatever, and didn't make the playoffs. So I think they've got a lot in place, and you put those pieces, it's kind of almost like a Trace Jackson Davis piece, that you just need another piece maybe to add into it, and it's going to make that team even kind of scarier at times. So I love the pick by the Pacers putting him in on that roster. I absolutely love it.
Well, Sam, I would say I was looking it up, and I was looking at Jalen Pickett. So I didn't know this because this is the first time I'm seeing it. Apparently, he was selected by the Pacers, but he did not sign with the Pacers. He got traded to the Denver Nuggets.
Oh, geez. I'm glad you said that. You just ruined my day.
I'm sorry, Sam. I didn't. Your computer ruined your day.
Yeah, well, yeah, my computer started my crappy day, and you just made it worse. Happy Friday, everybody. Jeez.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, let's send a potentially transcendent player to the champions. Yeah.
The Pacers do that all the time. It's like the more and more I look into NBA guys that have been drafted, like Kawhi was originally drafted by the Pacers. I'm like, wait, the Pacers can draft great players, but they just never wear the uniform for them. They just get traded to go somewhere else.
Well, and the thing about Jalen Pickett,
rewind and knock that out for the Pacers. He's going to be a good player for the Nuggets then.
Yes, well, and I think what's fascinating about Pickett and the evolution to the NBA level is we saw him just play so much bully ball in the Big Ten, or as Brad Underwood called it, what did he call it? Booty ball?
Yes.
I think was the quote for Brad Underwood, where he just would back down a guard because he was too tall as a guard. He would back somebody down to the block and then play from there. You send a double, he's going to pass, find the weakness, and get an assist. If you just say one-on-one, he's going to score in the low post as a guard. So I think it will be interesting because I don't think you can play that way in the NBA. But I believe he's got way more in his closet to use and utilize. So I just think it's going to look different, which is fine. I think he's fully capable of playing in different styles. But what we got accustomed to seeing with Jalen Pickett, just backing guys down and playing from there, I don't believe that's how it's going to work in the NBA. So I'm interested to see that next step of his game. And then Seth Lundy getting drafted. We talked about the first time that Penn State's had two Nittany Lions selected in the same draft. A knockdown shooter. That whole Penn State squad was knockdown shooters, but a knockdown shooter going in the second round. I'm interested to see how that pans out as well.
Yeah, especially now that he's paired with Trae Young in Atlanta. Now it does kind of worry me because that makes him a little bit smaller in like the forward position as far as shooting, because Trae's only like 6'1", Seth is I think 6'6" if I remember correctly. But I mean, it does give Atlanta a really interesting offense. To your point, Dalton, he's a great shooter. Trae is a great shooter. So what can he pick up from Trae Young and vice versa for that Atlanta Hawks team? Because they've been one of those, at least for the NBA perspective, they've been really close. They made a couple, pretty unique runs for being who they are and what they have. So yeah, for him to go there, and again, for these Penn State guys, I think they end up in great situations because again, it's not one of those on their own. They are great individuals and they're great stars, but they're not one of those, transcending, superstars that we've been used to seeing from a couple other guys. So for them to go to these teams and be able to be a part of a talented team and add their own individuality to it, I think they're going to be set up really well for that.
I agree.
Well,
I'm not going to say another word because maybe he'll get traded in the time I talk. So
he wasn't drafted by the Pacers, Sam. He's okay. He's safe.
Well, since we're talking about great shooters, we haven't really talked about the first Big Ten prospect that went off the board, Jet Howard, drafted by the Orlando Magic at number 11. This is somebody who really excels at the catch and shoot, but he showed many other facets of his game. But I think this is going to be one to watch. And in Kobe Buffkin, as we mentioned, at 15, the other Wolverine to be drafted in this one, also going to Atlanta, a quick, explosive guard, not the biggest body. I think that's one of the concerns when you look at Kobe Buffkin, but it's also a move maybe to look a couple years down the road where he adds a little bit more weight, adds a little bit more to his frame, but he certainly shows the quickness, the ability to hit mid-range shots, to hit a variety of others, but he shows the creativity with his offensive game, and I think he's quick enough defensively where he's going to be able to to maybe make some things happen, getting in passing lanes, so on and so forth. Again, I think just the concern with Bufkin is just getting some weight on, which, I mean, that's kind of normal when you're drafting, 19-year-old guys, which I think he is. He had his sophomore season at Michigan just this past year, but he was young as a sophomore. Right. He was one of the younger ones. So, I think that's one of the natural things you deal with as an NBA team when you draft somebody so young. So that's not really a red flag by any means.
I tell you, putting Howard with Banchero, I think that's going to be a nice 1-2 punch from down on the post for them, because Howard's a really good player. You said, like you said, he can catch and shoot. That's effective. Banchero is the reigning rookie of the year. We all know what he can do. So, I mean, it's one of those that I think Orlando is in a pretty decent position. I don't know that they're going to, all of a sudden be in the playoffs, but they've got some good pieces that they can start building off of.
Yeah. Now, a quick question to you guys. What does this say about Juwan Howard as a head coach? Because, I mean, you think about it. Obviously, Michigan has the talent, especially from an NBA prospect. They're like, hey, we're going to take these guys and we expect these guys to be basically day one starters out of Michigan. But what does that mean for him that he couldn't put it together to at least make a couple of decent runs with the players that he has?
I've already said this year's a make or break year for him. Especially after losing all the pieces that he did, losing Dickinson, losing Love after he committed and then had to leave and go to Arizona. Mm-hmm. I think with what he's got, whether it's a bearish cupboard or not, this is a make or break season for him, I think, because of that lack of ability to take those highly touted teams to any further than just the Sweet 16. I mean, people could say the same thing for Matt Painter. I wouldn't be shocked if there's some rumblings if Purdue doesn't do what they should coming this year, if they start, more people start saying, well, we need to fire Matt Painter, kind of the same thing. So I think these are two coaches that this year they have a pretty important season that they need to do something with. I just think Matt Painters might be in a little bit better position to do more, maybe.
Oh, I certainly would agree with that. But I think it's interesting, too, to Tony's point, because you look at the roster that there was last year, then you have Hunter Dickinson, who's an All-American level performer. You had Kobe Bufkin and Jet Howard, both drafted in the top 15. That's a lot of talent to not make the NCAA tournament. And I think because, Tony posed the question as, what does it say about Juwan? There was a really interesting piece. I don't even call it a piece. You call it a thread, I suppose. Miller Kopp, Indiana basketball player, and previously was at Northwestern, just recently graduated and finished. He had tweeted out, and I'll just read the tweet because I found this fascinating. He says, before every Big Ten game, I ask the assistant coach one simple question. What are the 3 most important things to do for us to win this game? And so he gave 3 things for every Big Ten team based on his perspective. And then he added a funny one just because. So I'll read Michigan's, what he wrote for Michigan. 1, make Jet shoot tough jumpers. 2, push Dickinson's catches out. 3, play with extreme pace and transition. And 4, the funny one, memorize their 3 favorite plays and you'll be good. What that says to me is it was very elementary, the guide to be able to break down what Michigan's doing. So I found that to be fascinating and really telling, kind of from inside the locker room of opponents, of how they viewed and handled Michigan throughout this last year.
Well, and I also think that you've got to look at the fact that Juwan Howard's had issues with holding his temper too. Yeah. Not just getting mad on the sidelines, physically going after coaches, in multiple years. It's not even he had one isolated incident. He's done it multiple times. So, and I think that goes a long way too. You can only have so much patience of tolerating that and then not having results, he's so it's tough, because you could see that he's probably pretty darn knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of whether or not it will translate into his players. And right now he's kind of not getting that.
Well, I think, you know what? Matter of fact, since we bring up the Miller Kopp thread, I enjoyed this so much. Why don't we stay here for a moment? Let's go through a couple of these other teams because Miller did such a great job, and I think it really was insightful. So let's go to Purdue because that's Sam's favorite team. He said, 1, pressure the crap out of their guards and wings.
Mm-hmm. True.
2, make Edey catch the ball as far from the rim as possible.
Easier said than done.
Correct. Well, and especially because I remember I was watching a game with a couple of coaches this past year, and we were watching Purdue on TV when we were on the road. And I remember we're watching Edey post up, and he was getting pushed up the lane up to about the elbow. He caught the ball, and he still was able to essentially drop step.
Yep.
Like it wasn't a back down. He just drop stepped, and because he's so big, his legs were able to get him to the rim from near the elbow. Like it goes to show you why it's so hard to guard. And I had a conversation years ago with Paul Davis, who was a great Michigan State center. He was part of the 05 Final Four team, and we were talking about his NBA playing days. And we were asking him who's the hardest to guard. And I said it had to be Shaq, right? Like it's got to be Shaq because Shaq was so dominant and so big. And he goes, everybody thinks that. And he says, the toughest person for me to ever go against was Yao Ming because he has a whole foot on you. Like there's not much you can do. And I see a lot of those similarities with Zach Edey and what he presents in the Big Ten. So those were 2 of them. Number 3, Miller Kopp says, make Edey leave the paint on defense. Just try and get him away from the rim so that way you can score in the interior. And 4, he said, call out their football plays on the board like you know what they mean. So that was Miller Kopp's strategy. And some of the Indiana assistant coach's strategy to beating Purdue. But I feel like there's a lot of truth in that. I thought that was really, really insightful.
Yeah, and it's kind of telling at what kind of player Zach Edey is when 2 of the 3 things to beat Purdue correlate to him.
And again, I would say almost by extension, the first one.
Yeah.
If you pressure the guards, that means they turn it over, or you're
They
trying to
can't
get them
get
to
it
turn
to
it
him.
over before they can get it to Edey.
Right.
Like the whole game plan is just how do you get Edey out of the way?
Right.
Like that's it.
Well, and they're gonna have to deal with it one more year, and they're gonna have to deal with another 7-footer that's there. That's totally a different type of 7-footer.
Yeah,
Gotta love it.
Watch out for Purdue.
Just trees all over. It's like a forest. Let's do Michigan.
Fast little guards running in between them all.
You're right. Let's do Michigan State because we have an interest on the show in Michigan State as well. First, let me give you a guess what the first one is.
Get Tom Izzo yelling.
Close. Tony?
I say that would probably be my first one. Just piss Tom Izzo off.
The first is box out.
Oh,
they send 4 to the glass the whole game in all caps. Second is build a wall in transition. And Miller says even though they used to play with more pace than they do now. 3 is hit them first.
Yeah.
And 4, the funny one from Miller is don't play them at the Breslin Center.
Yeah. Yes.
I agree with that one.
Yeah.
I actually agree with a gentleman from IU.
But I thought that was just tremendous. If we take just a couple more minutes, what other programs are you interested in hearing the scouting reports on?
What about Maryland? Because, that's a different animal when it comes to, when they're at home. It's got to be don't play them in Washington or in Maryland, right? Come on.
Well, the ones that Miller laid out, 1, guard the ball one-on-one. Can't get beat one-on-one. 2, rebound the ball. 3 was take care of the ball on offense. And 4, the funny one, says learn how to guard their one go-to play. It's called Utah.
But you know what? They're darn successful with that Utah play.
Absolutely.
Don't try to fix it if it's not broken.
That's right.
And if it works, just keep using it.
That's right.
But I thought that was a really good look, though, at what the Big Ten basketball programs are doing, especially this last year. And if you haven't checked it all out yet, because he does it for all 14 teams, check out the Miller Cop's thread on Twitter because it's great stuff.
Wouldn't it be 13 teams he was part of IU?
But he still did one for IU.
Oh, he did? Well, yes, let's hear IU's.
And I'm not sure if he did this as when he was at Northwestern, because you remember that he went against Indiana during those times. But here were the ones he laid out for Indiana. First off, double trace with active hands and force. It can't just be high hands. You got to put pressure and active hands all over them. 2, figure out how to guard the pick and roll, because you remember Jalen Hood-Schifino was doing that nonstop. Indiana, it's the 3 is don't play them at home, so don't play them at Bloomington.
Yeah.
And 4, the funny one from Miller Cop is don't let Miller Cop get hot.
Yeah, that one's good. That makes me think he didn't do it from when he just was. How would people play us?
Yeah, right. I think you're right. But that was some good stuff and pretty insightful. So I wanted to share that. Well, I don't know what else we have time for. Do we want to save the TV contracts for another week? Where are we at? Or do you think we can squeeze it in here in the next few minutes?
It's up to you. You're the one that's got to go.
All right, let's do this real quick. So let's take a look at the TV contract. So this is something that actually Tony was able to send in our group message to have us all aware of. And, of course, the Pac-12 media rights has been a topic of conversation for weeks, if not months at this point, trying to find television partners, and they're having a hard time getting it done. So now there's a report floating around, and it was reported by Jim Williams on Twitter, report floating around that the Pac-12 might want to go direct to consumer with their next package. So I saw the grimace from Sam. So basically what they would be doing, they'd be cutting out the middleman. They'd be cutting out cable. And so you would have, they already have a Pac-12 network, and there had been rumors for a long time that the Pac-12 network might cease to exist. But if this is the play, the Pac-12 network would become your primary hub for production in all of this stuff and dispensing. So you'd be able to go to the Pac-12 network and you'd be able to find all your different live events. Of course, it would be at a cost, and then figuring out what the appropriate cost that would allow customers to still want to be involved with it. That would be the next kind of sticking situation in this development if they go this way. Now, there are rumors this is not the first direct-to-consumer. And direct-to-consumer, if this helps you think in layman's terms, like Disney Plus, Netflix, like that's direct-to-consumer. It's its own streaming service, yada, yada. There are rumors that ESPN's talking about doing this years down the road. They're preparing for this. So this wouldn't necessarily be the first story we've ever had on direct-to-consumer, but it would be the first from a conference standpoint. And keep in mind, before we get both Sam and Tony's thoughts here real quick, we're starting to see this in the NBA. New Phoenix Suns owner Matt Ishbia has decided, with the regional TV company Bally struggling as it is and going near bankruptcy, I believe was what the report was. They're just going to make their own service, and they're going to be able to provide it for fans everywhere. So everybody can watch Phoenix Suns games. I believe there are more NBA teams interested in that, maybe even more sports teams in general. So this is becoming a bit more of a thing, but we haven't seen it quite on a conference-wide scale like the Pac-12. Let's get both of your thoughts real quick. We'll start with Sam, because you were the one grimacing. Sam, what do you think about this? Is this a bad idea if the Pac-12 network or Pac-12 is already struggling to find a companion when it comes to the TV rights?
Well, let's think about the Big Ten. Okay, they just signed a huge deal with multiple networks to do their games over the course of the next 7 years or whatever. And the thing is whoever they get everybody. It's not just the people that are interested in Pac-12 or Big 10. It's everybody gets the Big Ten. You're going to have to pay for the Pac-12 specifically. I don't know. I'm not going to pay just to watch the Pac-12. It's not going to be interesting to me. It's not of interest. Now, if there's just a random game on one of the networks that carry football, basketball, whatever, I might watch it. If Stanford Cal is on, I might watch it because it's on. I'm not going to go search it out because I have no interest in it other than it's just football or it's a basketball game.
So before Tony jumps in, because I'm kind of with you at Pac-12 after dark, maybe it's just time for me to start going to bed if that's going to be the case. Maybe my Saturday should be coming to an end. But let's flip the roles on it. Let's say the Big Ten was in this position where the Big Ten wanted to do direct to consumer. Is that a package you would pay for? Are you just saying you're out on the Pac-12 if they do this because of the quality?
Dalton, I don't even pay for the Cubs direct to consumer. Why would I pay for the Big Ten? Like, no.
Okay, well, I mean, you said it was not of interest. The Big Ten is of interest,
but
not enough.
And it's not enough. I have a Cubs tattoo. Like, I have all sorts of Cubs stuff behind me.
You don't have a Big Ten tattoo?
I do. Well, no, but I don't pay.
Not yet.
I don't pay for the network that will bring me every single Cubs game, though, or most of the Cubs games. Just because I don't have enough time that I'm not gonna feel like I'm gonna get my money's worth. Mm-hmm. You know, when it comes to the Big Ten, even let's say they did it, I wouldn't pay for it. I would figure out a way to follow them without actually watching the games. And we've talked about this when we were talking about the NFL's taking their game, a couple of their wild card games or one of their wild card games behind the paywall.
And Big Ten's doing that this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just won't watch those games, or like with the Cubs, since I don't pay for the marquee network, I found a different way. I pay for the Bat app to where I can listen to all the radio calls. So I can listen to every Cubs game. So I found a cheaper, better way that I can do other things while I'm still consuming what I want to consume. And it's just, so no, it's not worth to me. And I think this is desperate measures by a desperate conference personally. I think it's the Pac-12. I don't know. It's not that they couldn't get a media deal. I don't think they had much opportunity to get a media deal.
No, and that's been well documented. I think that's a very fair point, and I think that context is important in this. Also hidden in there was a win for radio, which in 2023, that is awesome. Right to hear for the win for radio.
I love radio.
Hidden in there.
I like to listen and be able to do other things while I'm listening. I don't like to be shackled to a television if I don't have to be, and I'd much prefer to float in my pool or whatever and listen to a game,
So Tony, we haven't gotten your thoughts. What do you think of this whole Pac-12 situation of possibly going direct to consumer?
I think this is one of those before the Pac-12 meets its end. This is kind of the last ditch, like let's kind of play with something before we go. Because this actually reminds me a lot of the NFL, like Sunday Ticket, how they left DirecTV and they moved to YouTube to try to appeal more to that direct to consumer. This is what this kind of reminds me of. Now, to your point, and much to Sam's when he was talking about this doesn't really interest me enough to pay for it. That's what got the Pac-12 in this situation to start with anyway. And you can even look at last season when USC and UCLA both were doing extremely well throughout most of the year, and they weren't filling up their own stadiums. It's like, to me, by the looks of it, and I'm not saying it for every team on the West Coast in the Pac, it doesn't seem as if that part of the country cares as much for college football as deeply as the Midwest and even to the East Coast. So
that's played out through numbers. Like you're 100% right. That's statistically accurate.
Well, take a look at LA Dodger games. If you're watching the first 3 innings, the stands are empty, and then all of a sudden they fill up. It's because people show up late.
Well, and think about even a couple years ago when the Rams won the Super Bowl and they had that parade. That was a sad parade. Like you could go to anywhere else. Look at Tampa when Tampa had theirs. Look at even Kansas City. They had a big parade. Like to me, it looks like the West Coast it doesn't matter as much for these homegrown teams unless you're the Lakers. Then you're die hard, and even then it's like, okay, well, if they're not winning, we don't really care as much. So this to me is kind of that last nail in the coffin for the Pac before they go away, because and I know you guys both read the report, but for people who don't know, this is probably a telltale sign that it might not be this year, but next year we probably see Colorado potentially back in the Big 12.
And I think Arizona goes with them.
Arizona, probably Arizona State, and honestly, even Utah will probably join into the Big 12. And then we may even see a Big 10 expansion with Washington and Oregon potentially coming in the Big 10, because we've talked about that. They've already been vetted. They've already been approved. The Big 10 just said, just wait a second. Let's see how things kind of play out first before we bring y'all into the circle.
Which brings up a great question. Sorry, Sam, and I know we'll get to your point, but it brings up a great point, though, because if members of the Pac-12 flee and Pac-12 dissolves, and there are plenty of rumors that ACC schools are currently pounding the pavement to kind of see what kind of outlets there are we looking at maybe 3 big conferences with the Big 12, Big 10, SEC? Does it kind of get away from that, too? Because the Big 10 and SEC would be, I would believe, more superior in football. And maybe that's not completely fair to say, but because TCU just got into the college football playoff. But that could be a conversation for another day. Your point real quick, Sam?
Housed by an SEC team.
Yes, badly.
My point was going to be a funny one that probably that only you on the show would get, and then maybe about 6 people otherwise. Tony saying that the Rams Super Bowl parade was pathetic. I was going to say, is it kind of like the DeKalb County Free Fall Fair Pet Parade at 3:00 in the afternoon? See, he knew exactly.
Right. It is an inside joke, but yes, that really rings out.
And to give you some perspective, Tony, there's about 16 people watching the pet parade, and that's what it is.
That's the extent of the parade.
That's a pretty good comparison. We're gonna have to use that later on.
You like that?
But all right, so that's gonna do it for another edition of Big Talk. Glad so much that everybody was able to join us for this week's episode. As we finally got back to a little bit of normal. We had the 3-man crew. It's been great. But on the way out the door, Sam, Tony, you guys do your thing. Let everybody know where they can find us.
Tony, do you have it, or do you need me to?
Oh, I can.
Oh, I actually got it. Oh, it actually responded to me. Wow.
Look at you. Tony. So you can find us on the TikToks, the Instagrams, and the Twitters at Big Talk. That is B1G_Talk. You can also find us on Facebook at Big Talk at B1G Talk. Remember, you can't put an I in there. Otherwise, you're going to get some other weird stuff that's not us. And I don't know if they're as good or not. So I'm not going to throw any shade.
Don't click
throw any slander.
Big Talk. Don't click the all Big Talk. That's not us.
That's not us. That's not nearly as good of a logo. Not nearly as cool. Nothing like that.
Just, we're better.
Exactly.
Even though it's probably backed by the Big Ten.
Hey, we don't know that. We don't know that.
You're absolutely right. Go ahead. Sorry.
You can also find us every week on the ASAP network as well, at least for the current moment. Hopefully next month we'll start getting back to 2 episode weekly shows
every 3 weeks.
Every 3. Ooh, we getting longer. But for everybody that doesn't know, and obviously for us, we're excited because, gents, we are in the last month without college football.
That's right.
Next month it comes back.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
I'm ready for basketball season, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I'm kind of there too.
We definitely are.
And if you don't catch our stream on ASAP, you can find us our video stream on Spotify as well. So, and then you can listen to the audio version, which sometimes is a little bit better because you don't see us anywhere you find podcasts.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you all check us back out. Make sure you keep joining us weekly for these episodes of Big Talk. But for this edition, big thanks to all of you for tuning in and joining us. Sam Sprunger all the way to your right, Tony Hollinsworth in the middle of your screen. I'm Dalton Shetler. So long, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.